Sharon Graham, what did you mean when you talked about Labour potentially being a 1990s tribute act?
Well, look, what I meant is that actually the economy is in crisis. Britain is in crisis. And what we need to do now is not to look back to 1997. What we need to do is be more like what happened in 1945. The country needs a reboot, and Labour needs to put policies forward that give it that reboot.
I wonder if you were reacting perhaps to some of the moves that Sir Keir made in his reshuffle last Monday when he promoted various Blairites and made it look, I mean, it was described at the time as putting the band back together. Was it a response to his recent moves?
Well, look, I'm less interested in who's there. I'm more interested in what they're going to do. They have an absolute beautiful moment. The country is crying out for change. And all they seem to want to do is to tinker around the edges with old policies. I'm asking Keir, when I meet him, I ask him, I speak to Rachel, they need to do something different. People are suffering. We've got workers now who are literally just existing, they're not living. And so Keir needs to do something quite radical in terms of putting the country back together.
Now, in terms of radical policies, you're going to be speaking here tomorrow, I think, on a motion to renationalise energy companies. That's one of the things you're putting forward. And also, I think you're critical of Rachel Reeves, who you mentioned just now, saying no to a wealth tax. How are you going to persuade the Labour Party to adopt the measures that you like? Because they don't seem to want to do that at the moment.
Well, look, there's nothing radical about us having ownership of our own energy. I mean, we seem to be happy with ownership by other governments, but not by our own government. There's nothing radical about that. And I think the people who will push Labour, I think it will be the electorate. I think they are sick and tired of being in this position where they're paying these huge bills. We could save £1,800 a year for every household if we privatised energy. It would only cost £90 billion. It's not a lot of money for a £2.5 trillion economy. They need to look at that seriously and stop worrying, is it left, is it right? Do it because it's the right thing to do.
What about the anti-strike laws? We've heard a bit from various union leaders today about the act that's called the Strikes Minimum Service Levels Act, and Paul Novak, the General Secretary of the TUC, is talking about reporting the government to the United Nations Workers' Rights Watchdog. That's the ILO, International Labour Organisation. And there's all sorts of talk about about trade unions rather, perhaps proposing more sort of industrial action rather than less against that. What do you think about the move about the ILO? I mean, isn't that just a bit of a talking shop?
Well, look, I mean, obviously the TUC have made the decision to do that, and every little helps, as they say. But actually what I'm focused on is actually making sure that workers can take strike action. Good employers, I deal with a lot of blue-chip companies all the time. They actually don't think this is a workable act in any event. I don't think it will happen up and down the country in a lot of places. What it will do is extend the strikes. If everybody can't be involved in the strikes, then actually it just makes the strikes longer. So I actually think it's unworkable. I don't think it's going to work. And I actually think a lot of employers think it is actually ridiculous.
Very briefly, what are you going to say to Sir Keir Starmer at the big dinner tomorrow night if you're sitting next to him, or you don't think they'll put you next to him?
Well, lucky for me, I'm not going because I've got a pay negotiation going on, so I've got a reprieve. I don't have to go to the dinner. So I'll be seeing him. Maybe when I see him next week, I'll have a lot of things to say to him about what he should be doing.
You're seeing him next week?
I am seeing him next week, yes.
Oh, right, OK.